This is the island of Mauritius, a volcanic speck in the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean, and it was the Dodo's world. It was a world that for millions of years evolved in blissful isolation. The air here is thick and humid, scented with the sweet perfume of fruit you've never smelled before. Giant tortoises the size of small cars trundle through the undergrowth, their shells glistening in the dappled sunlight. Lizards, a foot long and brilliant green, dart across the broad leaves of endemic palms. And everywhere you look, there is life unbound and unafraid. You feel the soft, damp earth beneath your bare feet, each step cushioned by a thick layer of decaying leaves and moss. The canopy above is a dense, interlocking puzzle of branches and leaves, filtering the sunlight into dancing patterns on the forest floor. You look up not for birds, but for the lack of them. The typical clamor of a tropical rainforest, the shrieks of monkeys, the calls of parrots is absent. This is a quiet, contemplative place. It's the kind of silence that makes you listen closer, not for a threat, but for a curiosity. And there, through a gap in the ferns, you see it. A creature unlike anything you've ever imagined. Its body is round, almost comically, so covered in a soft bluish-gray down. Its legs are short and sturdy like pillars built to support a surprisingly heavy frame. And its beak is the stuff of cartoons. Long hooked and a vibrant yellow, it looks like it was designed by a sculptor with a mischievous sense of humor. You found a dodo. It looks at you with a calm, almost vacant curiosity. There is no panic, no flutter of wings, just a slow, deliberate turn of its head, its dark eyes blinking lazily. This utter lack of fear is its most striking feature, a trait born of a million-year-long peace treaty with its environment. There were no land mammals to hunt it, no snakes to snatch its eggs. The dodo was a resident of a paradise where the only real dangers were accidental, a fall from a cliff, a territorial dispute with a giant tortoise that went a bit too far. This evolutionary isolation allowed it to shed the burdensome tools of survival that other birds carry. Why fly when there's no reason to escape? Why be afraid when there's nothing to be afraid of? The dodo's ancestors, which historians still debate whether they were a type of pigeon or a distinct lineage, arrived on this island, and finding an all-you-can-eat buffet and no one to bother them, decided to lean into the good life. They grew bigger, heavier, and slowly, over generations, lost the power of flight. It was an adaptation for an Eden, a perfect solution to a non-existent problem. You could almost hear it saying, flying is a lot of work. This whole walking thing is really working out for me. You watch as the dodo waddles slowly towards a patch of fallen fruit. It pecks at a bright red berry, its massive beak acting like a precision tool, cracking the tough outer skin with a gentle snap. Its diet was almost exclusively fruit, a constant feast of native berries, nuts, and seeds. This abundance of food meant the dodo never had to struggle for its next meal, further cementing its sedentary lifestyle. A little-known fact is that the dodo's digestive system was perfectly adapted for this fruit-heavy diet. It had a special gland that secreted a powerful acid, allowing it to break down even the toughest seeds and fruits. This made it a vital part of the island's ecosystem, acting as a walking seed disperser, fertilizing the soil with its droppings and ensuring the survival of many plant species. Without the dodo to spread their seeds, some of the native trees, like the tambalacoque, or dodo tree, struggled to reproduce after the bird's extinction. It's a beautifully simple, interconnected system that you're witnessing, a perfectly balanced machine of life. The dodo continues its leisurely meal, completely unaware of the cataclysmic changes that are about to crash upon its peaceful shore. The irony is almost unbearable. This creature, a testament to a life lived without fear, would become the very symbol of fear's ultimate consequence. A symbol of a world changing too fast for evolution to keep up. You can't help but feel a pang of melancholy standing there in the silent, sun-drenched forest, knowing that this tranquility is not just temporary, but fleeting. The island is beautiful, but its beauty is fragile. And the dodo, this trusting, gentle-feathered friend, is the most fragile of all. You know what's coming. The arrival of the ships, the sound of human voices echoing through the trees for the first time in history, the clatter of axes and the scent of gunpowder. But for now, you just stand and watch a silent witness to a perfect moment in time, a moment that is already imperceptibly slipping away. As you watch the dodo waddle away, you find yourself getting a little closer. You notice the downy texture of its feathers, not sleek and flight-ready like a pigeon's, but more like the soft, unkempt fluff of a chick that has simply never grown up. This fluff covers a surprisingly robust body. You can almost feel the weight of it in your mind, a solid, grounded mass built for walking, not soaring. Its feet are thick and leathery with short, blunt claws, perfect for plodding through the undergrowth, but utterly useless for perching on a branch. You remember what a biologist once said about the dodo. It was an evolutionary couch potato, perfectly adapted to a life of serene inactivity. It's a slightly sarcastic but strangely accurate description. Why bother with the gym when the fridge is always full and there are no bullies to run from? This sedentary life, you realize, was key to the dodo's existence. With no need to escape from predators, the bird had no evolutionary pressure to maintain flight muscles, a high metabolism, or even sharp senses. Its eyes were likely suited for finding fruit on the ground, not spotting an eagle from the sky. Its hearing was probably just good enough to listen for the rustle of a falling mango. Historians still argue whether the dodo's tiny wings were purely vestigial, or if they had some rudimentary purpose, perhaps for balance, or for a comical flapping during courtship displays. The general consensus, however, is that they were about as useful as a chocolate teapot on a hot day. Now let's talk about the real engine of the dodo's life, the fruit. Mauritius was a botanical paradise, a natural orchard with no one to harvest its bounty but the native wildlife. The dodo was at the top of the food chain in its own little world, but its diet was entirely vegetarian. This meant its survival was inextricably linked to the island's unique flora. Imagine an endless, all-you-can-eat buffet of fruits you've never seen. The Latania palm with its sweet, date-like fruit, the sideroxylon with its large, nutrient-rich drupes, and of course the aforementioned tambalacoke, its hard golf ball-sized fruit, a particular favorite. The dodo's beak, that magnificent hooked masterpiece, was not for tearing flesh. Instead, it was a specialized tool for cracking open these tough, fibrous fruits. Think of it as a built-in nutcracker, but for nature's gumballs. A quirky tidbit about this is that the dodo was so well adapted to this diet that its very existence was tied to a certain type of gut flora. The bacteria in its stomach were perfectly suited for breaking down the specific fibers of the native fruits, making the dodo a living fermentation tank. This is a crucial detail because when the dodo's habitat was later destroyed, it wasn't just the bird that died, but a whole invisible, symbiotic ecosystem inside it. The dodo's flightlessness and its massive size were a brilliant solution to the problem of island living as long as the island remained isolated. One mainstream historical fact about this is that this phenomenon of large, flightless birds evolving on isolated islands is not unique to the dodo. The elephant bird of Madagascar, the moa of New Zealand, and even some species of rail on other Pacific islands followed a similar evolutionary path. This process, known as island gigantism, is a fascinating example of how ecosystems without predators can allow creatures to grow to enormous sizes. It's a bit like a student who never has to study for a test. They get big and lazy because there's no pressure to be sharp. In the dodo's case, the test was a predator, and it was a test it never had to take. As you stand there watching the dodo happily peck at its fruit, you can't shake the feeling that you are a ghost from the future, watching an impending tragedy unfold in slow motion. This creature's very design, its gentle, unsuspecting nature, is what would ultimately prove to be its downfall. Its perfect adaptation to a perfect world made it utterly unprepared for an imperfect one. It's a sad and beautiful paradox. The same traits that made it a success in one environment would make it a spectacular failure in another. The dodo lived a life of simple pleasures, eating, sleeping, and maybe a little leisurely waddle, now and then completely unaware that its greatest weakness was a trust it had no reason to ever question. You can't help but feel a little protective of it. You want to shoo it away to warn it of the storm on the horizon, but you know you can't. All you can do is watch and remember. You follow the dodo through the undergrowth, and its peculiar walk becomes a point of focus. It isn't a run, and it certainly isn't a graceful glide. It's more of a ponderous side-to-side waddle. Imagine a bowling ball with a bad case of the hiccups. This clumsy gait, you realize, is a direct result of its unique physique. Its short, thick legs are positioned relatively far back on its body, giving it a low center of gravity. This makes it incredibly stable on the uneven forest floor, but also makes it a bit like a ship in a storm listing from one side to the other. And there's a quiet, almost comical dignity to it, a sense that the dodo is simply doing the best it can with the body it was given. This lack of grace, a direct consequence of its flightlessness, is a fascinating example of evolutionary trade-offs. The dodo sacrificed the elegance of flight for the efficiency of a life on the ground. Think about it, flying is incredibly energy-intensive. It requires powerful muscles, a high-octane metabolism, and a constant expenditure of calories. By giving up flight, the dodo unlocked a new kind of existence. It could conserve energy, grow to a larger size, and focus entirely on finding food. This evolutionary bargain was a winning strategy in a world without predators. It's a bit like deciding to give up running to become a world-class napper. For the dodo, it worked perfectly, until it didn't. One mainstream historical fact about the dodo is that it belonged to the pigeon and dove family, the Columbidae. This fact is often a surprise given the dodo's imposing size and its comical appearance. It's hard to look at a plump dodo and a graceful white dove and see the family resemblance, but the genetic evidence is clear. The dodo, Raphus cucullatus, was a giant, flightless pigeon that had simply taken the concept of a sedentary lifestyle to its absolute limit. Imagine your average city pigeon, but on a diet of pure fruit, and with millions of years to get really, really comfortable. A quirky tidbit about the dodo's physical appearance relates to its feathers. Early descriptions and illustrations were often inconsistent, leading to a lot of confusion. Some accounts described it as having a tuft of curly feathers on its tail like a small, fluffy bustle. Other reports mentioned a grayish-brown plumage. This confusion likely stemmed from the fact that early drawings were based on a mix of memory, second-hand descriptions, and possibly even different stages of the bird's molting process. The dodo's feathers, you can now imagine, were more like a shaggy woolen coat than the sleek plumage of a typical bird. They were adapted for a humid tropical climate, not for aerodynamics. The dodo wasn't built for speed, it was built for comfort. Historians still argue whether the dodo's physical oddities were the result of a single, rapid evolutionary leap or a slow, gradual transformation over millions of years? Was there a sudden genetic mutation that led to its flightlessness, or did the lack of need for flight simply allow its genes to drift over eons, favoring size and heft over speed and agility? The answer likely lies somewhere in the middle, a combination of genetic adaptation and environmental pressures over a long stretch of time. But as you watch the dodo waddle, it's hard not to feel that its unique physicality was a masterpiece of specialized evolution. You stop for a moment, letting the dodo get a little ahead. You notice its head-bobbing motion as it walks, a rhythmic movement that helps it to stabilize its vision. It's a common trait among ground-dwelling birds, a way of compensating for their lack of aerial perspective. It's a small, almost imperceptible detail, but it speaks volumes about the dodo's world. Its life was lived entirely on a horizontal plane, a world of roots and rocks and fallen fruit. It never saw the island from above, never soared on the thermal currents, never felt the wind beneath its wings. Its world was small, safe, and entirely terrestrial. You continue to follow its slow, deliberate path. The dodo stops and uses its beak to probe the soft earth, perhaps looking for a fallen seed or a juicy root. It's a peaceful, utterly non-threatening creature. You feel no sense of danger, no need to be quiet or cautious. You could walk right up to it, and it would likely just blink at you with that same calm curiosity. It's a trusting creature in a world that until now has never given it a reason not to be. This trust, this beautiful, terrible naivete, is the final piece of the puzzle. The dodo's waddle, its size, its lack of fear, they are all part of the same story. A story of a world that was perfect, a creature that was perfectly adapted to it, and the moment when that perfect world was shattered forever. The dodo you're following stops its gaze fixed on something in the undergrowth. You hold your breath, not out of fear, but out of a quiet anticipation. You're about to get a glimpse into its social world, a world of instinct, and you suspect a surprising amount of tenderness. It lets out a low gurgling sound, a call that is more like a purr than a bird's chirp. From a thicket of ferns, another dodo emerges. It's a little larger, a little bolder, and it waddles towards the first with a familiar head-bobbing motion. This is a mate. You're witnessing the dodo's version of a date night. Mating rituals, historians still argue whether they were elaborate or simple, were likely a gentle, non-aggressive affair. With no rivals to fight or predators to impress, the dodo had no need for the flashy displays of a peacock or the aggressive sparring of a wild turkey. Instead, their courtship was probably a quiet and affectionate process. They would likely share fruit preen each other's downy feathers with their beaks and engage in a series of slow, rhythmic dances. Imagine two feathered bowling balls doing a slow-motion waltz. It's an image that's both comical and deeply sweet. The dodo's world, you are realizing, was defined by a kind of peaceful coexistence. One mainstream historical fact about dodos is that they laid a single egg at a time. This is a very low reproductive rate, especially when compared to many other birds that lay clutches of multiple eggs. This slow pace of reproduction was a testament to the dodo's confidence in its environment. With no threats, there was no need to mass-produce offspring to ensure a few would survive. A single egg, carefully nurtured and protected, was enough. This low reproductive rate, a perfect adaptation for a predator-free world, would later prove to be one of the final nails in the dodo's coffin. When a threat finally arrived, the dodo's population simply couldn't replenish itself fast enough to keep up. You watch as the dodo pair finds a small, sheltered clearing. They begin to gather fallen leaves and soft moss, shaping it into a rudimentary nest. A quirky tidbit about this process is that the dodo's nest was likely built on the ground of vulnerability that would become a catastrophic flaw after the arrival of foreign predators. The egg itself was large, a creamy white oval, a miniature monument to the hope of a new generation. The parent dodos would take turns sitting on the egg, their massive bodies providing both warmth and a formidable presence. You can almost feel the parental bond, the quiet dedication to this single precious life. There's a certain melancholy to this scene, a beautiful, innocent image of family life that you know is already doomed. The dodo chick, when it finally hatched, would have been a miniature version of its parents, a fluffy gray ball of down with an oversized beak. It would have been raised with the same lack of fear, taught to waddle and peck for fruit, but never to run or fly. It's a sad irony that the dodo's parenting style, so perfectly suited to its environment, was a lesson in a false sense of security. The parents, in their loving ignorance, were teaching their offspring how to thrive in a world that was already in the process of disappearing. There's a joke here somewhere about a helicopter parent who is so overprotective that they forget to teach their kid how to cross the street. For the dodo, the whole island was the crosswalk, and they never learned to look both ways. As you stand there, a silent observer of this domestic scene, you feel a deep sense of connection to this creature. The dodo wasn't just a weird bird. It was a complex social animal with family's bonds and a life full of purpose. Its life was simple, yes, but it wasn't primitive. It was a life of harmony and balance, a life that many of us in our complicated modern world can only dream of. You feel a pang of sadness for what you know is coming, but also a sense of gratitude for having witnessed this fleeting moment of peace. You remember what a peaceful world looks like and what a trusting creature is like, and you know you'll never forget it. As the dodo pair settles into their parental duties, you become more aware of the broader ecosystem of Mauritius. While the island lacked the fanged and clawed predators of mainland continents, it wasn't entirely without its dangers. You're walking on a path, and you stop. They're partially hidden by a cluster of broad leaves is a giant Aldabra tortoise, an import from a nearby island. This isn't a predator in the traditional sense, but its sheer size and slow, inexorable movement make it a potential threat to a dodo egg or a helpless chick. It could simply lumber over a nest without even noticing, a testament to the fact that not all dangers come with a menacing snarl. You also spot a small native boa constrictor, no more than 3 feet long, slithering silently up the trunk of a tree. This snake is a hunter, but a small-scale one likely preying on lizards and small rodents, not a full-grown dodo. However, for a newly hatched chick, it would be a significant threat. These are the kinds of subtle, low-level dangers the dodo evolved alongside. It was a world of slow threats and quiet competition, where survival was a matter of being a little more robust than the next creature, not faster or smarter. The dodo was a survivor in its own right, a testament to a peaceful kind of strength. One mainstream historical fact about the dodo is that it shared its island home with a diverse array of other unique flightless birds and animals, many of which also went extinct. The Rodriguez solitaire, a close relative of the dodo, lived on a neighboring island and met a similar fate. The Mauritian giant skink, the Mauritian ground boa, and the Mauritian owl all coexisted, with the dodo forming a balanced, self-contained ecosystem. The dodo wasn't just a quirky anomaly, it was a key player in a whole team of creatures that were perfectly adapted to a life of quiet isolation. A quirky tidbit about the dodo's defense mechanisms is that they likely didn't have any. Lacking the ability to fly or run, and with no natural enemies, they had no need for them. You might imagine a dodo standing its ground, maybe pecking at a curious lizard, but it wouldn't be out of aggression. It would be out of a complete lack of understanding of what a threat is. Its best defense was likely its large size and its unassuming nature. There's a certain humor in the idea of a dodo looking at a potential threat and thinking, "You seem confused. Are you lost?" Historians still argue whether the dodo's peaceful demeanor was a deliberate evolutionary choice or simply a side effect of its unique environment. Was it actively selected for its trusting nature, or did that trust simply arise from the absence of fear? The truth is, it's likely a combination of both. The dodo's easygoing temperament was a perfect fit for a world where there was no need to be on edge. The concept of an ambush of a sudden violent end was something that simply did not exist in its world. As you continue your walk, you get a sense of the sheer fragility of this perfect balance. The dodo, the tortoises, the giant, skinks, they all exist within a delicate web of life. A single thread, pulled from the wrong place, could unravel the entire tapestry. The dodo's place in this web was that of a peaceful herbivore, a walking seed disperser, and a gentle giant. It wasn't a hero or a villain. It was simply a part of the story, a character, in a drama that had been playing out for millions of years. You look back at the dodo nest you just saw. You feel a pang of melancholy, a sense of quiet dread. The island is beautiful, but its beauty is deceptive. The peaceful silence you've been enjoying is about to be shattered. The biggest danger to the dodo wasn't a tortoise or a snake. It was a species that hadn't even set foot on the island yet. A species that brought with it a different kind of evolution, one based not on adaptation to a single environment, but on a relentless conquest of all of them. The dodo, with all its gentle quirks and peaceful habits, was about to meet a creature from a world it couldn't even begin to comprehend. The air shifts. You feel it before you see it. The scent of salt and unfamiliar wood smoke carried on a gentle breeze from the coast. You hear it before you understand it. A distant rhythmic sound, the creak of wood and the slap of waves. The dodo you've been watching raises its head, its dark eyes blinking slowly. It doesn't recognize this sound. It has no context for it. To the dodo, it's just another noise in the symphony of the island, no more or less significant than the rustle of leaves or the call of a lizard. It simply waddles on, perhaps a little more alert, but with no hint of fear. You, however, know exactly what it is. The first human contact, the beginning of the end. You hurry towards the shore, drawn by a morbid curiosity, to witness this first fateful encounter. Through a gap in the mangrove trees, you see them. The sails of a ship, a European vessel, its canvas catching the wind. Dutch sailors in their sturdy leather boots and woolen coats are wading ashore, their faces etched with the strain of a long voyage. They look a little bewildered, a little exhausted, but mostly they look hungry. This is the year 1598, and this moment marks the beginning of the dodo's downfall. The sailors, led by Admiral Jacob Cornelis van Neck, landed on Mauritius and found a world that was entirely unprepared for them. They found no fierce tribes to fight, no dangerous animals to avoid. They found a literal Eden, a land of easy meat and abundant resources. You watch as a sailor, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and greed, spots a dodo. He points and shouts his voice, a jarring cacophony in the peaceful forest. The dodo, in its beautiful, terrible naivete, doesn't flee. It simply stands there, blinking perhaps, tilting its head in confusion. It's a meeting between two different kinds of evolution, one that adapted for peace and one that mastered war. One mainstream historical fact about this encounter is that the sailors initially called the dodo the walgvogel, or nauseous bird. This was because they found the meat of the older dodos to be tough and unpalatable. However, the younger, smaller dodos were more tender, and the birds were so incredibly easy to catch that they became a regular source of fresh meat for the hungry sailors. It was a food source that walked right up to them, a living, feathered buffet that had no concept of self-preservation. A quirky tidbit is that the dodo's total lack of fear was so extreme that the sailors could simply walk up to them and club them to death. This was a concept completely alien to the birds, and it's a difficult image to shake. The sailors weren't a pack of vicious predators. They were just tired, hungry men doing what they had to do to survive. But their needs and the dodo's complete vulnerability created a perfect storm of tragedy. It's a sad, almost darkly comical scene, a man with a stick and a bird that just stands there and looks at him. Historians still argue whether the dodo's trusting nature was a sign of its limited intelligence or simply a logical outcome of its environment. Was it a stupid bird, as some early accounts suggest, or was its behavior a perfectly rational response to a world without danger? The truth is, the dodo wasn't stupid. It was just a creature of its own world. Its intelligence was perfectly suited for finding fruit and raising a family, not for understanding the concept of a human with a club. The dodo's behavior was a logical conclusion to a long, peaceful history, and the sailor's behavior was a logical conclusion to a long, violent one. You watch as more sailors pour onto the beach, their axes and shovels at the ready. They begin to chop down trees to build a temporary settlement. They release pigs, goats, and monkeys from their ships, creatures that would quickly go feral and become a much greater threat to the dodo and its eggs than the humans themselves. The balance of the island, a million-year-long negotiation, is being undone in a matter of hours. The peaceful silence is replaced by the shouts of men, the clatter of tools, and the frantic squealing of foreign animals. The dodo's world, a quiet and beautiful dream, is officially over. The nightmare has begun. The dodo's first brush with fame was, you realize, a strange and fleeting thing. The reports of the Walvogel were a curiosity back in Europe, a bizarre footnote in the journals of sailors. But it wasn't long before some of these live birds were captured and brought back to the continent. You can only imagine the journey crammed into a cage on a long, arduous sea voyage, the dodo's calm demeanor slowly giving way to a quiet confusion. The bird that had never known fear was now experiencing a new and terrifying world of rocking ships and strange noises. One mainstream historical fact is that the dodo became a kind of exotic status symbol for the wealthy and powerful. The first dodo to be brought to Europe arrived in the early 1600s, landing in the Netherlands. It was a live specimen, a living, breathing example of a creature from a lost world. You can picture it in a menagerie, a strange, waddling curiosity kept in a gilded cage alongside other exotic animals. It was a creature of wonder, a testament to the strange and marvelous things that could be found in the far corners of the world. A quirky tidbit is that the dodo's appearance in European paintings and drawings varied wildly. Artists who had never seen a live dodo were forced to rely on descriptions, leading to some truly bizarre interpretations. Some paintings show the dodo as a sleek, graceful bird, while others depict it as an impossibly fat, clumsy creature. These early, often inaccurate depictions are a fascinating look at how a creature can transform from a biological reality into a folk legend, a caricature of its true self. The dodo became a mythical beast before it was even fully understood, a cautionary tale waiting to happen. Historians still argue whether the dodo's initial popularity in Europe contributed to its eventual extinction. Did the desire to have a dodo for a menagerie lead to a greater number of birds being captured, Or was the damage already being done on the island itself? The truth is likely a combination of both. The menageries and private collections provided a small-scale but consistent demand for the birds, but the real catastrophe was happening on Mauritius. The birds that were captured and brought back to Europe were simply a handful of casualties in a much larger war. You can almost feel the dodo's quiet resignation as it waddles around a small enclosure in a European palace. The damp, humid air of Mauritius replaced by the cool, dry air of a stone courtyard. The abundant fruit and berries replaced by a meager diet of grains and vegetables. The familiar calls of the other dodos replaced by the chatter of onlookers and the clatter of a foreign city. It was a slow, quiet death, not from violence, but from loneliness and a profound displacement. The dodo, a creature built for a life of freedom, was now a prisoner, a living relic of a world that was already gone. Remember the peaceful, serene dodo you saw in the forest, the one waddling to its nest, its head held high. The dodo in the menagerie is a pale imitation. Its feathers are a little ragged, its eyes a little dull. It still has that same calm, trusting gaze, but now it's tinged with a deep, inexplicable sadness. The dodo was not just a symbol of a forgotten species. It was a living, breathing creature that experienced loss and confusion. Its story is not just one of a bird that went extinct. It's one of an individual that was taken from its home and forced to live in a world it was never meant to be in. It's a quiet tragedy, a personal story of a gentle giant that was simply too trusting for its own good. The dodo's time in captivity was a strange and often cruel chapter in its history. While it was spared the immediate violence of the sailors' clubs, life in an exotic menagerie was a slow kind of torment. You can almost feel the chill of a London courtyard, the unfamiliar stones under the dodo's leathery feet. The soft, loamy earth of Mauritius, remember that now it's a memory, a faint whisper against the cold reality of a cage. The dodo, a creature that had the entire island for its playground, was now confined to an enclosure no bigger than a large room. One mainstream historical fact about dodo captivity is that only a handful of live specimens ever made it to Europe. The conditions on the long sea voyage were harsh, and the birds' delicate constitutions and specialized diet meant that many did not survive the trip. The most famous of these was a dodo that lived in a menagerie in London in the 1630s and was later described by the English traveler Peter Mundy. His account, along with a few others, provides a rare glimpse into the dodo's life away from its native home. He described a gentle, slow-moving bird, confirming the reports of its lack of fear and its unique waddling gait. A quirky tidbit about these captive dodos is that they often became a source of great frustration for their keepers. Their specialized diet of tropical fruit was impossible to replicate in Europe, and they often refused to eat the foreign foods they were given. Imagine a chef trying to make a gourmet meal for a picky eater, but the picky eater is a giant, flightless bird with very specific tastes. The dodo's digestive system, so perfectly adapted to the fruits of Mauritius, struggled to cope with the grains and vegetables of Europe. It was a kind of dietary, slow-motion protest, a silent refusal to adapt to a world that was so fundamentally alien to it. Historians still argue whether the dodo's eventual demise in captivity was due to a combination of disease, malnutrition, and the sheer stress of being in a foreign land. Was it a specific ailment that did them in, or was it a general failure to thrive in an environment they were never meant to inhabit? The answer is likely a bit of both. The dodo was an exquisite example of a creature that had evolved to fit a single, perfect niche. When that niche was removed, the creature simply couldn't survive. It's a powerful and heartbreaking lesson in the delicate balance of life. You can picture the dodo, its feathers a little ruffled, its eyes a little lost, as it watches the world through the bars of its cage. It no longer has the rustle of leaves or the smell of ripe fruit. It has the smell of hay and the sound of curious onlookers and the profound, crushing silence of a life lived alone. The dodo in the menagerie was a ghost, a physical manifestation of a creature that had already ceased to exist in its natural habitat. It was a symbol of a world that was being torn apart, and it was a symbol that within a few short years would be gone forever. This is the ultimate irony of the dodo story. It wasn't the violence of the sailors that extinguished the bird, but a series of quiet, compounding factors. The introduction of foreign animals, pigs, goats, and rats that preyed on its eggs and competed for its food. The clearing of the forest for settlements. The fact that the dodo's gentle nature made it an easy target. The menageries and private collections were just the last stop on a one-way trip, a sad and final chapter for a creature that deserves so much more. The dodo was not just a victim of human predation, but of a complete and total ecosystem collapse. And you, as you stand in the imaginary menagerie, are a witness to the slow, agonizing end of a gentle giant. As the last living dodo specimens died in captivity, the dodo began its transformation from a biological reality to a cultural myth. Its image, already distorted by early drawings and conflicting descriptions, became a symbol, a cautionary tale, and a character in a children's story. You can almost feel the dodo slipping from memory, its soft, downy feathers and gentle waddling gait becoming a hazy, half-remembered dream. It's no longer a creature you can touch and see. It's a concept, a word, a ghost. One mainstream historical fact is that the dodo's extinction, so sudden and complete, was not widely known or even accepted at the time. For decades, it was a creature of rumor and folklore. Some thought it was a fantastical beast, a kind of living caricature. It wasn't until the mid-19th century that the dodo was formally recognized as a distinct, now extinct species. This recognition came largely from the work of scientists and naturalists who were beginning to seriously study the concept of extinction. The dodo, with its clear historical record and its bizarre appearance, became the poster child for this new field of study. A quirky tidbit is that the word dodo, itself so common and beloved today, has a strange and disputed origin. Some historians believe it comes from the Dutch word dodor, meaning sluggard or lazy bones, a reference to the bird's slow-moving nature. Others suggest it's derived from the Portuguese dodo, meaning simpleton, or fool, a cruel but understandable description from the perspective of the sailors who found a bird so easily caught. Regardless of its origin, the word itself became synonymous with a kind of gentle, almost tragic foolishness. Historians still argue whether the dodo's transformation into a myth helped or hindered its legacy. Did its mythical status help keep its memory alive, or did it obscure the true facts of its extinction? The answer is likely both. The dodo became a character in stories, a symbol of something foolish or old-fashioned, but this also meant that its story was told and retold and remembered. It was no longer just a bird that died. It was a character in the human drama of progress and loss. The dodo became a part of our collective consciousness, a kind of cultural missing link between the world of the real and the world of the fantastical. You can see the dodo in Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. A wise, eccentric creature leading a bizarre caucus race. This fictionalized dodo, a caricature of the real thing, helped to cement its place in our imagination. The dodo wasn't just a bird, it was a character. It was an object lesson in a world that was changing too fast, a friendly reminder that not everything can survive. It was a kind of gentle, feathered ghost haunting the edges of our memory. The dodo story, as it was passed down through generations, became a powerful and enduring allegory. It was a symbol of obsolescence, of a kind of gentle failure to adapt. To call someone a dodo was to call them out of date or foolish, a kind of cultural shorthand for a creature that didn't belong in the modern world. But you, as you reflect on the dodo's life, know that this is a fundamentally unfair assessment. The dodo was not foolish. It was a creature of a different time and a different world. Its quiet, trusting nature was a testament to a kind of innocence we can only imagine. The dodo's transformation into a myth is a sad reminder that we, as a species, often find it easier to remember a caricature than to remember a truth. The final days of the dodo bird on Mauritius were a vanishing act, a silent, slow-motion tragedy playing out in the lush forests. The arrival of the Dutch, remember them, the hungry sailors and their animals. Their presence was a catalyst, not a singular cause. The true killers were the quiet ones, the rats that scurried from the ships and feasted on dodo eggs in their ground-level nests. The pigs and goats left to roam free that destroyed the dodo's habitat and competed for the same food sources. The monkeys that learned to climb trees and steal eggs and chicks. The dodo, with its single egg and a body ill-equipped for a fight, simply had no defenses. One mainstream historical fact is that the last confirmed sighting of a live dodo in the wild was around 1662. This is a remarkably short period of time, just over 60 years from the first recorded human contact. The dodo, a species that had thrived for millions of years, was wiped out in little more than a single human lifetime. It was a rapid, devastating decline, an extinction event that was so swift that many people didn't even realize it was happening until it was too late. The dodo's silence was not a roar of defiance, but a quiet, almost imperceptible fading away. A quirky tidbit is that the final fate of the last dodo is a subject of much speculation and folklore. Was it a lone bird cowering in a remote corner of the island? Did it die of starvation as its food sources were destroyed, or was it killed by a hungry sailor who saw no significance in the creature's last dying moments? We'll never know for sure. The last dodo likely didn't die with a flourish, but with a whimper. It was a solitary, unheralded end, a final quiet moment in a life that was lived without a single enemy. Historians still argue whether the dodo's extinction was an inevitable outcome of human arrival, or if it could have been prevented. Was its trusting nature and low reproductive rate a fatal flaw that was always going to lead to its demise, or could conservation efforts have saved it, if only someone had had the foresight to act? The truth is, the dodo's extinction was a product of its time. The concept of conservation, of protecting a species from a human-caused extinction, was simply not a part of the human consciousness in the 17th century. The dodo was a victim of a world that didn't yet know how to mourn its own creations. You feel a profound sense of sadness as you imagine those final years. The dodo, a creature that had never known fear, was now living in a world of constant anxiety. The smells of smoke and the sounds of foreign animals were a constant threat. The familiar fruit trees were being chopped down, their leaves trampled under the feet of pigs. The dodo was a refugee in its own home, a stranger in a land it had ruled for millions of years. It was a slow, agonizing process, a final, painful act that we, as a species, are only now beginning to truly comprehend. The dodo story is a mirror, a reflection of our own power and our own folly. It shows us what happens when an advanced species enters a world that is not prepared for it. It shows us that we are capable of bringing an end to a beautiful and unique form of life, not out of malice, but out of a kind of ignorant indifference. The dodo didn't die from a cataclysm. It died from a series of small, seemingly insignificant acts of carelessness. And as the last dodo faded from view, it left behind a profound silence. A silent, feathered ghost that would haunt our collective memory forever. With the dodo officially gone from the world, its story was far from over. In fact, in many ways, it was just beginning. The living bird was replaced by a scientific puzzle, a series of skeletal puzzles and forgotten clues that would take centuries to piece together. You can almost feel the dust of a musty museum, the quiet hum of a research lab, as you join the hunt for the dodo's remains. The dodo was no longer a living, breathing creature. It was a ghost to be hunted, a mystery to be solved. One mainstream historical fact is that for many years after the dodo's extinction, the only surviving remains were a few fragmented specimens scattered across European museums. There was the infamous Oxford dodo, a head and a foot, a kind of dismembered relic. There were a few bones in a museum in Prague and a partial skeleton in Dublin. These few precious pieces were all that remained of a creature that had once numbered in the thousands. It was a kind of scientific scavenger hunt, a race against time to find the last physical evidence of a lost world. A quirky tidbit is that the famous Oxford dodo head and foot were so poorly cared for that they were almost thrown away. In the late 18th century, a museum curator, thinking the specimens were in a poor condition, almost had them disposed of. Luckily, a keen-eyed scientist recognized their importance and saved them from the rubbish heap. It's a powerful reminder of how fragile history is and how easily a priceless piece of the past can be lost forever. Historians still argue whether the dodo's scarcity in museums was a result of its rapid extinction or simply a lack of interest in preserving it. Were there more dodos brought back to Europe that were simply lost or destroyed? The truth is likely a combination of both. The dodo was a scientific curiosity, but it wasn't a top priority. In a world full of new discoveries and exotic creatures, a dead, strange bird from a remote island was not a top priority for preservation. It was a kind of scientific indifference that, in a way, was as destructive as the sailors' clubs. The search for the dodo's remains was not an easy one. It was a painstaking, frustrating process, a kind of forensic investigation into a crime that had been committed centuries ago. Scientists and naturalists, armed with old drawings and a few scattered bones, began to piece together a picture of the dodo's skeleton. They used their knowledge of other birds, their understanding of evolution, and their own intuition to try and create a complete picture. It was a kind of scientific archaeology, a deep dive into the dust and bones of the past. You can almost feel the excitement of a new discovery. A new bone found in an old collection, or a new drawing discovered in a forgotten library. Each piece of the puzzle brought the dodo a little closer to reality. It was no longer a myth or a caricature. It was a scientific specimen, a creature with a specific anatomy and a specific place in the evolutionary tree. The dodo, which had faded from the world with a whimper, was now being reborn piece by piece in the sterile silence of a lab. And in a strange way, it was a kind of redemption, a final, quiet act of remembrance for a creature that had been so unjustly forgotten. The search for the dodo's remains brought to light some of the most famous and poignant relics of its existence. You are now in a quiet room, a place of hushed reverence where you are able to examine the very few remaining physical pieces of this lost world. There in a glass case is the Oxford dodo's head and foot, a dark mummified claw, and a beak that once pecked at fruit in a prehistoric paradise. It's a surreal experience, a meeting with a ghost that is both tangible and profoundly absent. The head with its distinctive hooked beak is a powerful reminder of the bird's unique physicality, its perfect adaptation to a world without danger. The foot, with its thick, leathery skin, is a testament to a life lived on the ground, not in the sky. One mainstream historical fact is that the few remaining dodo specimens were a key part of the scientific debate around extinction in the 19th century. Scientists like Sir Richard Owen, a brilliant but controversial figure, used the dodo's remains to help build the case for extinction as a natural and permanent process. The dodo wasn't just a strange dead bird. It was a powerful piece of evidence, a physical testament to a world that could and did disappear. The dodo's head and foot became a symbol of a new way of thinking about life on Earth, a world where species could and did vanish forever. A quirky tidbit is that the dodo's most famous and complete skeleton was not found until the late 19th century. A man named George Clark, an English amateur naturalist, discovered a massive collection of dodo bones in a marshy bog on Mauritius. It was a kind of dodo graveyard, a treasure trove of bones that had been preserved for centuries in the oxygen-deprived mud. This discovery was a game-changer. It allowed scientists to create a full, accurate skeleton of the dodo, finally confirming its unique anatomy and its place in the evolutionary tree. It was a scientific jackpot, a kind of Christmas morning for a community that had been working with just a few fragments. Historians still argue whether the dodo's scarcity in museums was a result of its rapid extinction or simply a lack of interest in preserving it. Were there more dodos brought back to Europe that were simply lost or destroyed? The truth is likely a combination of both. The dodo was a scientific curiosity, but it wasn't a top priority. In a world full of new discoveries and exotic creatures, a dead, strange bird from a remote island was not a top priority for preservation. It was a kind of scientific indifference that in a way was as destructive as the sailors' clubs. The dodo's story, which had begun in a lush green paradise, was now being told in a sterile lab with a collection of dry, brittle bones. The head and the foot were silent, of course, but you can feel their story. The story of a gentle, trusting creature that lived a life of quiet harmony, and then, in a flash of historical time, was gone forever. These few remaining specimens are a powerful reminder that the dodo was not a myth, not a cartoon character, but a real living, breathing creature. And its disappearance left a hole in the world that can never be filled. You look at the glass case, at the ancient mummified foot. You remember the damp earth of Mauritius, the soft feel of the dodo's downy feathers, the head-bobbing walk. And in this moment, the dodo feels less like an extinct curiosity and more like a ghost, a feathered whisper from a world that is now just a collection of bones in a museum. It's a quiet, humbling moment, a reminder of the fragility of life and the immense power of our own historical indifference. With the dodo's physical remains now providing a clearer picture, the next great challenge began to reimagine a forgotten creature. You step into the world of historical artists and modern paleontologists, a world where science and imagination collide. The dodo, which had existed for centuries as a bizarre and often inaccurate caricature, was now being meticulously reconstructed, feather by feather, with a new level of scientific rigor. The goal was to bring the dodo back to life, at least in our minds. One mainstream historical fact is that early artistic renderings of the dodo were often based on a single incomplete specimen or a second-hand account. The most famous of these is the painting by Roland Savary, a Dutch artist who is believed to have painted the dodo from a live specimen in the early 17th century. His paintings, with their heavy-bodied grayish birds, became the canonical image of the dodo for centuries. However, modern scientific analysis based on the complete skeletons suggests that the dodo may have been sleeker and more upright than Savary's depictions. It's a bit like discovering that your favorite cartoon character was actually based on a completely different animal. A quirky tidbit is that the dodo's feathers, and indeed its whole body shape, may have varied depending on the time of year. Just like many birds, the dodo likely molted, losing and regrowing its feathers. This would have given it a different appearance throughout the seasons. The dodo you saw in the forest, with its soft, downy fluff, may have been a different version of the bird than the one seen in a European menagerie. Historians still argue whether the dodo's color was a uniform gray or a mixture of different shades. Was it a light gray, a bluish hue, or even a mix of brown and white? The answer is likely lost to time, a quiet mystery that will never be solved. Historians still argue whether the dodo's physical appearance, as we now understand it, was a source of its downfall. Was its heavy body and lack of agility a fatal flaw, or was it simply an adaptation to a world that no longer existed? The truth is, the dodo's physicality was a perfect solution to a non-existent problem. Its slow, waddling gait was not a sign of its incompetence, but a testament to its confidence in a world without danger. The dodo wasn't designed to run or fly. It was designed to be a peaceful, contented existence that was tragically cut short. The reconstruction of the dodo became a powerful exercise in historical empathy. Scientists and artists worked together using what they knew about the bird's skeleton and its environment to create a more accurate portrait. They studied the fossilized remains of its food, the geology of its island home, and the climate of the 17th century. The dodo was no longer a myth. It was a biological puzzle, a challenge to our understanding of evolution, and a testament to the power of our own scientific curiosity. You look at a modern artist's rendition of the dodo, a creature that is both familiar and profoundly alien. Its eyes are not those of a simpleton, but of a calm, trusting being. Its body is not a caricature, but a testament to a life lived without fear. The dodo, which had once been a laughingstock, was now a powerful and poignant symbol of a lost world. And you realize that its story is not just one of a bird that went extinct, but one of a creature that was so perfectly a part of its world that it had no defenses against a world that was so profoundly different. The dodo's journey from a living creature to a historical footnote and then to a scientific icon has cemented its place in our modern world. It is no longer just a weird, extinct bird. It has become a powerful and universal symbol for conservation. You see the dodo everywhere on the logos of environmental organizations, in children's books about endangered species, and in documentaries about the fragility of life. Its story is a kind of modern morality, play a warning about the consequences of our actions. One mainstream historical fact is that the dodo's extinction, so sudden and complete, helped to popularize the concept of human-caused extinction. The dodo's fate became a cautionary tale, a lesson that we as a species have the power to destroy a species forever. This awareness, which was still in its infancy in the 17th century, is now a cornerstone of modern environmentalism. The dodo is a ghost that haunts our collective consciousness, a silent reminder of the stakes involved in our relationship with the natural world. A quirky tidbit is that the dodo's image is often used in a way that is both a tribute and a kind of gentle self-mockery. The dodo in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, remember him, he's both a figure of authority and a bit of a bumbling fool. This dual nature, you realize, is a perfect reflection of our own complex relationship with the dodo. We mourn its loss, but we also find a kind of dark humor in its trusting nature and its comical demise. The dodo is a powerful symbol, but it's also a kind of a gentle joke, a feathered reminder that even the most perfect creatures can be undone by forces they don't understand. Historians still argue whether the dodo's legacy as a symbol of extinction is a fair or accurate representation of its story. Was it a passive victim, or did its unique physical and behavioral traits simply make it an easy target? The truth is, the dodo's extinction was a complex and multifaceted event, but its legacy is simple and powerful. The dodo is a reminder that even the most robust and seemingly invincible creatures can be wiped out in a historical blink of an eye. The dodo story is a profound and poignant lesson, a kind of historical echo that reminds us that we are not the only actors on this stage. You feel a profound sense of gratitude to the dodo, this quiet, trusting creature that has taught us so much. It taught us about the delicate balance of ecosystems. It taught us about the power of evolutionary isolation. And most importantly, it taught us about the permanence of extinction and the immense weight of our own historical responsibility. The dodo story is a kind of historical scar, a wound that reminds us of the power we have and the responsibility we have to wield it wisely. As you stand here reflecting on the dodo story, you realize that its legacy is not just one of loss. It is also one of hope. The dodo story has inspired countless people to become conservationists, to fight for the preservation of other species, and to work for a better, more sustainable future. The dodo may be gone, but its spirit, its powerful and enduring legacy, is very much alive. It is a feathered ghost that whispers in our ears, reminding us to be better, to do better, to protect the world that we have been so blessed to inhabit. The dodo story is a tragic one, yes, but it is also a powerful and enduring testament to the resilience of hope. The dodo's legacy has taken a new and in some ways shocking turn. We are no longer just mourning the dodo. We are talking about bringing it back. The field of de-extinction, a controversial but fascinating new area of science, has set its sights on the dodo. The same technology that can piece together a dodo's genome from a few scattered bones is now being used to explore the possibility of recreating the creature itself. It's a bold, almost science fiction-like proposal, a final dramatic act in the dodo's long and winding story. One mainstream historical fact is that the dodo's DNA has been successfully extracted and sequenced from a few of the precious remains, including the Oxford dodo's foot. This is a crucial step in any de-extinction effort. The complete dodo genome, a kind of biological blueprint, is now in the hands of scientists, a testament to the power of modern genetics. The dodo, which was once a biological mystery, is now a digital file, a string of A's, T's, C's, and G's that holds the secret to its very existence. A quirky tidbit is that the dodo's closest living relative is the Nicobar pigeon, a beautiful iridescent bird that lives on a remote island in the Bay of Bengal. This pigeon, with its stunning rainbow-colored plumage, is a living link to the dodo's evolutionary past. The Nicobar pigeon is a kind of biological cousin, a distant relative that is now the subject of intense study for de-extinction efforts. Scientists believe that by using the Nicobar pigeon's DNA and combining it with the dodo's, they may be able to create a viable dodo embryo. Historians still argue whether de-extinction is a moral or ethical act. Is it a kind of scientific arrogance, A hubristic attempt to play God and bring a creature back from the dead? Or is it a moral imperative, a way to right the historical wrongs we committed and give the dodo a second chance? The answer is likely in the eye of the beholder. De-extinction is a concept that challenges our most deeply held beliefs about life, death, and our place in the natural world. It forces us to ask, do we have the right to bring a creature back? And if so, what responsibility do we have to protect it? The dodo, which was once a symbol of the finality of extinction, has now become a symbol of a new kind of scientific hope. Its story is no longer just one of loss, but one of a potential comeback. It is a powerful and poignant reminder that the lines between what is possible and what is impossible are constantly being redrawn. The dodo story is not just a historical event. It is an ongoing narrative, a living, breathing saga that continues to evolve. The dodo, a creature that lived a life of quiet harmony, is now at the center of a profound and controversial debate. It is a ghost from the past that has returned to haunt our present, forcing us to confront the deepest questions about our own power and our own responsibility. The dodo, which taught us so much about the finality of extinction, is now teaching us about the possibility of resurrection. It's a fitting end to a story that began in a world of silence and ended in a blaze of scientific and philosophical inquiry. The dodo, a simple, trusting bird, has become a symbol for a new era of human responsibility and a testament to the power of our own scientific ingenuity. This concludes our journey with the dodo, a creature that waddled its way into our hearts and our history. Its story is a powerful reminder that we are all, in a way, just passengers on a small, fragile planet, and we are all responsible for the creatures we share it with. Sweet dreams.